For a second there, I was accidentally streaming to Steam, but if I remember correctly, Steam only is good for gaming content, so I don't think they would want to see a bland update on their platform. Let's see. YouTube says online, Twitch says sending data. I'll give it 5 more seconds. Okay. I guess Twitch will be getting their content there at least time to go. What is up in the U-Box, guys? This is Top Hat Productions 115 coming at you with yet another video. I'm just going to turn up my microphone volume. Let me see. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Hello, hello. Okay. This stream is 4 weeks overdue, and I'm going to jump into things immediately. There are a lot of things to talk about, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is our 4K 60 plan. As of now, the 4K 60 live streaming concept, the idea, is still going. However, the ways at which I can go about this are quite limited right now. Part of that is due to the oh, and by the way, I'm going to be trying to limit my use of guttural sounds like and so if you happen to hear me use that to... Am I having networking issues right now? I was just a few moments ago, but back on topic. If you happen to hear me say things like or anything like that, feel free to point it out in the comments, and feel free to put a timestamp for future review. With that said, I may at times take a few seconds to gather my words, but that is something that I also wish to do away with in the future. But for now, this is just me becoming better and better at communicating with you guys through this medium, so that more content is in the same time frame instead of me saying repetitive things and using those noises that you would rather not hear. With that, I'm going to go on and hop back into topic. And as I was saying about the 4K 60 endeavor, that's going to take a while. One of the big limitations of streaming in 4K 60 FPS is the amount of bandwidth that takes. With H.264, it's, if I remember correctly, is it like 20 or 30 megabits per second? It is a massive number, and most houses aren't pulling down 20 to 30 megabits per second, I think, are they? I'm going to go in and pull up a little bit of information right now, just to make a point here. H.264, 4K, and of course 60 FPS makes it even more intense, right? Let's pull up the bit rates for that. I misspelled the word bitrate. Crap. Where are my numbers? Well, a good bitrate for 1080p is 10. And guess what? 1080p, if I remember correctly, is that a quarter of 4K? So if I want to do 1080p or 1080p 60, according to this source right here, yes, recommended upload settings. Perfect. So we have that here. Where I just said so someone needs to make a comment of that. Bit rates, perfect. Here is my point. Anything that you do in 1080p 60 is going to be 4 times more intense, 4 times more difficult at 4K. Watch this. Let's say that I did my streams at 1080p and I was only using 10 megabits per second. Now, as most of you already know, when I was doing 1080p a few months ago, back in last year, I didn't use 10 megabits per second. If I remember correctly, I was using a higher bitrate, maybe around 12 or 15 megabits per second. On 4K, it is just over 4 times as much bitrate required. Like 40 or 45, maybe 50 megabits to get a decent result. And this is for recommended bit rates in this case. Let's see what happens if I go to 60 FPS. 60 FPS, of course, increases the bitrate requirement. And if I go for 15 megabits per second at 1080p, the number jumps substantially. If I say 4 times 15, as someone would expect, since 1080p to 4K is a 4 times jump, I believe, and that's assuming that the frame rates stay the same. 15 times 4, that's 3, yeah, 60. I'm expecting at least 60 megabits per second. Well, for YouTube, they're suggesting even more. 66 to 85 megabits per second. Now, who here has home internet that's pushing that much through the pipe? Not many of us. And this is with, if I remember correctly, H.264? X264? Yeah. So, this is one of the major issues. I'm fighting against a bitrate limit here. One of the other major issues is, even if I'm not competing with bitrate, half the time, if I try to shove raw 4K 60 FPS through OBS, I'm going to get a little warning message down here, or maybe somewhere in the bottom, that says Encoder Overload. And right now I'm having a networking issue again. So fun times. But long story short is, with 4K, I'm running into a crap ton of issues. In fact, I'm running into issues before I even go for 4K at this point. Like every so often here, you're seeing... In fact, let me go ahead and try to monitor the stream right now, because I think that... Oh, and Twitch is online finally. Great. Only took a while. But even before touching 4K, I still occasionally have these little networking hiccups. And that's at maybe, yeah, 1300 megabits, I think. Yeah, 13 megabits, I think, is what I'm currently at right now. I think I'm at 13, maybe 14 megabits per second. And I'm getting these occasional networking hiccups where things just go downhill. And on your end, these networking hiccups may make the video look like complete and utter crunchy garbage, where it looks pixelated and distorted and disgusting. That's with me doing just 3K 60 FPS. Now imagine what happens if I try to send this up at 4K instead, because right now at 1300 kilobits or 13 megabits, I don't think I'm sitting at the recommended 4K 60 FPS bitrate. I think that would be, yeah, I'm more so around and I just said again. I am probably closer to 1440p recommended, and that's a huge stretch. So if I try to push 4K, firstly, I'm going to run directly into a networking issue, a networking limitation. On my side, going through my internet service provider, then going up to YouTube servers, then trying to go down, or at least the video stream is trying to go down to your client devices. Because even if I have an internet service provider plan that allows for 4K upload, it is not guaranteed that many of you will have that same capability to download or to receive a 4K 60 FPS stream. Secondly, even if we ignore the networking limitations, there is also the occasional, the encoder limitations that I run into at times too. Because remember, during early 3K 60 FPS, before I actually could even think of doing 4K, even with just 3K 60 FPS, I still would sometimes run into encoder overload, and it would show up in red text down here in OBS, which would say pretty much that I was attempting to do more than what my encoder could actually allow. Doing more than what... In fact, let me go in and find the definition here, because I'm not the best at explaining this, but OBS encoder overload. Let's just pull it up here. And this is with using NVENC, so not using processor here, using the GPU instead. Encoder. I'll just search the word overload. Yes. Encoding overloaded. In some cases, OBS will say encoding overloaded on its status bar, meaning that your computer can't encode your video fast enough to maintain the settings you have set it to, which will cause the video to freeze after a few seconds or periodic stuttering. This little message right here, remember when I used to see this during initial testing? Yeah, that one. So points number 1 and 2 are very clearly defined. Networking limitations. Hardware performance limitations. Pretty much saying that my workstation isn't fast enough to maintain the settings. And even once I get past those, there is one more thing that I'm going to end up running into. Even if I could push 4K 60 FPS to YouTube reliably, which is going to be very difficult and require a lot of tuning. Even if I could get it to end devices successfully, how many people would actually be watching in 4K? Most people are going to be watching in 1080p or 720p. That's really going to be the gist of it. Even if I could push 4K reliably, most people aren't going to be able to watch in 4K or simply would not watch in 4K due to whatever reasons on there. So with that said, I will continue to pursue trying to stream in 4K 60 FPS for you guys. But at the same time, the 4K 60 FPS effort is going to be heavily delayed, with priority being put onto other efforts, just due to the fact that it might not be worth it putting it on the front line at this point. I do not wish to go back on this promise because I want to fully go full steam ahead with 4K 60 FPS, but it might not be feasible to do so at this time. Of course, there are also other issues with it too, such as the fact that originally H.265 was supposed to come out and pretty much make all of this easier because of high efficiency. It's on the name, high efficiency here. Less bitrate for... Here, I'll pull it up. I think Wikipedia explains it best here in this case. Very easy to pull up. High efficiency video encoding, also known as H.265, Part 2, is a video compression standard designed as part of a project as a successor to the widely used AVC, that's H.264. In comparison to AVC, HEVC offers from 25 to 50% better data compression at the same level of video quality, or substantially improved video quality at the same bit rate. It also supports resolutions up to 8192 by 4320, including 8K Ultra HD. And unlike the primarily 8-bit AVC, HEVC's higher fidelity maintained profile has been incorporated into nearly all supporting hardware. Long story short, HEVC, if it had actually worked out, and if the standard had been as widely supported as I kind of needed, would have killed off the networking limitation because of the fact that the bitrate requirements for higher resolutions would have effectively gone down. Instead of needing a whopping 40 to 60 megabits per second for 4K, I could have easily gone away with something a little bit lower. But due to licensing concerns and other crap that got involved with HEVC recently, especially I think HEVC Advanced or something like that, there's like 2 different licensing models going in for it right now. And as a result of it, it's just a disgusting mess. So 4K 60 is going to, it's definitely going to be on the back burner as a result. And this definitely could have taken care of at least the networking part of it. The bitrate limitation could have been completely out of here. But, and I just said again. But due to, in fact, I'll pull it up here right now, HEVC. Let's pull up licensing. I think actually, licensing. Here, maybe this site has it. Okay. I don't have an easy source to pull up right now. The last source I pulled up that made it at least somewhat easy to visualize was actually a YouTube video. But the fact of the matter is, even before HEVC, ABC, or H.264, also had its own licensing hurdles, right? But from what I've seen out of HEVC, the licensing situation has possibly gotten worse. And with the worsening licensing situation, a lot of platform providers like YouTube and all, YouTube, Twitch, anyone who possibly could have pushed for this acceptance of HEVC probably aren't going to be touching it with at least a 10-foot pole for quite a while. And I set up again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link to a YouTube video in the description at the end of this to help kind of visualize how much worse, or at least how not optimal it is right now. Of course, if you're on the Discord server, you could easily see it by going to the video processing channel where I've already posted it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the link address and I'm just going to paste it right into the chat. Where is my chat? Great time to be looking for that. Chat app, there we go. Here we go. Boom. Discord, yep. Twitch and YouTube have both received it. Awesome. Okay. The video that I just posted into the chat, hopefully it shows up for you guys, should kind of help to see the issue for at least the licensing side of it. The long story short is, if it costs too much to bring a new standard on board, why do it at all? Most devices already use H.264, why rock the boat? So, as such, I'm stuck with H.264 as well, which means I have to work within those boundaries. So, as of now, 4K 60 FPS is being put off indefinitely because it is impractical for both you and I. You, the viewer, who expects a regular stream of content, and I, as in the person who's expected to provide that regular stream of content, which you already know I've broken that stream regularity multiple times over before. And thus, I'll just go on and hop off on this topic right now because it's partially infuriating, but it's also partially disappointing. It's partially infuriating because of the fact that this only increases the wait time for me to actually bring a regular content stream of 4K 60 FPS to you guys. But it's also disappointing because of the fact that I've been looking forward to this for over a year now, hoping that the hardware upgrades I've been investing would finally kind of pay off. And they have to an extent. I've moved on to a higher resolution, but I haven't moved on to the resolution that I was specifically hoping to achieve by this year. So we are going to be kind of working with 3K 60 FPS for a while, probably a year or two at least. Which isn't bad. I mean, it's better than 1080p. But at the same time, I was hoping to be a little bit further ahead than this by now. But now it's time for the next topic, because I'm pretty sure that talking about this one and the failures incurred is kind of a old thing to rail at here. Let's talk about something that's a little bit more enjoyable. During the past 4 weeks, there have been at least two major changes to Project Personal Data Center. first major change is I actually had to change over from using vCenter server for Windows back to using the vCenter server appliance. The reason why I had to do that is because of the fact that the vCenter server appliance unfortunately cannot work, or not cannot work, more so is incompatible. It is incompatible with running on the same machine as an Active Directory instance. You can either have one or the other. You can't have both. So if you have Active Directory, you can't have vCenter server for Windows. If you have vCenter server for Windows, then you can't have Active Directory. It is possible to install one over the other, but in most cases, Active Directory, I think, is just going to end up winning, and vCenter server just ends up not working. It stops working because of the fact that vCenter server for Windows actually uses a lot of the same ports as Active Directory. It has its own identity management and everything built in. And that was something that I kind of learned the hard way. It wasn't too much of a setback, but at the same time, vCenter server for Windows did boot up faster than the vCenter server appliance from all of my past experiences. So kind of having to revert back to the vCenter server appliance felt like a step back to me. However, that wasn't the end of the setbacks. No, it was comically compounded when when I was reminded of the fact that on vCenter 6.5, a lot of the features that you have access to in the Flash-based UI, the Flex UI, as they call it in the industry, I believe, are not available in the HTML5 UI. So in order to use 6.5 effectively, you have to use the Flash UI. But guess what? The year's 2021, and Adobe Flash is being, no longer supported. It is unsupported, and in fact, if you try to use Adobe Flash, you'll get one of those accursed. In fact, I can probably look it up, right? Flash 2020. I'm pretty sure they have it over Google, right? Where is it? There it is. There's that icon right there. If you try to use Flash in 2020, or should I say 2021, you'll probably run into this. Instead of the application running, you'll get that picture right there, which will then lead you to the information page on why you're getting that icon, which is, long story short, Flash is no longer supported, and they're advocating, rightfully so, for the adoption of newer technologies like HTML5, which I have no issue with. However, it does make my life a little bit harder because with vCenter 6.5, the Flex UI is Adobe Flash based, and the HTML5 user interface for vCenter 6.5 did not have all the features. In effect, vCenter 6.5 became practically useless for me overnight. So there were some settings that I had set up or configured that could not be altered as a result because I lost access to the Flex UI. There are some settings that it was settings I couldn't access, and then ones that I could access but didn't have as much control over as a result. So I ended up actually deleting, or should I say removing, the vCenter appliance 6.5 VM and replacing it with vCenter 6.7. Moving on to vCenter 6.7 meant that the HTML5 user interface that I had access to finally had all of the features, right? Not exactly. In 6.7, they didn't deprecate the feature, but they made it so that you couldn't actually configure, right? They didn't deprecate Virtual Flash in 6.7. But what they did do was they actually made it so that you couldn't configure Virtual Flash via the HTML5 UI. Instead, I think you have to go through, is it the Secure Shell instead? It's either Secure Shell or some other shell interface. But as a result, it makes managing virtual flash more difficult. And with that move to 6.7, I said again. I am on a roll today. With the move to 6.7, I pretty much lost use of the 1 terabyte of virtual flash that I had actually set up back in 2020. So I will have to look for a new purpose for those SSDs. Fun times, right? 1 terabyte of SSDs now kind of useless. I'll probably, you know what, maybe I could assign them to, and I said again, I could probably assign them to, before I go any further. Did anyone say anything in chat? No. I can probably assign those SSDs to some new VMs. I'm going to go in and break that loop before I say one more time. So that is just about it, I believe. Let me check to make sure I didn't skip anything for Project Personal Data Center. Right, I did miss something. Now that I've talked about vCenter, I'm going to go on and move on to the Active Directory issue. With the help of a friend or two on Discord, I actually managed to resolve the Active Directory issue. It was a DNS issue. And it was because of the fact that I had forgotten to include a few required name server records. So, as most professionals in the field will tell you, with Active Directory, DNS is very important. So be sure to double check your DNS, because if your DNS is not set up properly, your Active Directory will not work properly. With that, I'm going to go on and move on, because I'm pretty sure that there are tons of tutorials online on how to do Active Directory correctly, and they have probably done the topic over and over again like crazy, so I don't need to talk about it. But Active Directory, vCenter, right. Next thing to talk about, I am currently replacing the 4 terabyte drives that were planned for this project with 8 terabyte ones, effectively doubling the size of the external SAS cage in terms of capacity. The drives that I'm using, since I'm not sure if I've even put it on the project page yet, the drives that I'm using are enterprise drives, once again from Hitachi, because yeah, those guys rock. HGST, obviously they're 8 terabyte drives. They were manufactured in 2016, and the model number, can I find a model number? Yes, the model number is HUH72 1008, A as in Alpha, L as in Lima, 5204. That is the model number of the drive, I believe. I think someone online commented that they might be helium filled. I think, yeah. On here it says advanced format. So let's see here. Firstly, I now know that they're advanced format. Secondly, are these drives actually helium filled? Because I did not know that these are helium filled. And if they are helium filled, that would be a first for me. I have never bought that type before. Huge step up. HUH 72. Let's just go ahead and pull that up right now. And where are the specs? compared to air-filled ones. Ah! Didn't see that coming. Is this really a helium-filled drive? It just might be. So yes, these might actually be helium-filled, which is a first for me. I have never bought helium-filled drives before. Didn't even know that. I don't even think it was listed on the actual store page that I bought it from. Awesome. But anyway, this, or a variant of this drive, or its model, is what I will be using in Project Personal Data Center from now on. Sector size, 512. 3.5-inch drives, just like the last ones, 7,200 RPM, and 8 terabytes instead of 4 terabytes. And yes, as usual, enterprise grade drives, because I have a penchant for that. And on the same subject as the SAS drives, the cable connecting the cage for those SAS drives had to be replaced recently because the original cable went bad, and only 2 to 3 of them were ever showing up in ESXi at any given point. Now, I really don't have any clue as to why the cable died, seeing that the cage doesn't move around all that often, and the cable itself doesn't move around all that often either. But what I can say is that with the new cable, all 4 drives show up consistently in ESXi and also vCenter. So somehow the old cable died and the new one works just fine, which is great, but also a little bit of an expenditure that I didn't quite expect. On to the next topic. Yes. There is a final topic that I'd like to talk about for Project Personal Data Center, and it is the consideration of possibly including a certificate authority role in Project Personal Data Center. If I do so, it will possibly be hosted through the Windows Server VM, and if not through the Windows Server VM as a new feature or role, then possibly through Linux. As of now, I will be dedicating most of my efforts in that towards testing out the role for the Windows Server VM, because the Windows Server VM is already almost complete in terms of configuration. And with that said, there are already a decent number of tutorials online for how to do it through Windows Server, so it should be relatively easy. In addition to that, the Windows Server VM is dedicated to being primarily infrastructure for the rest of the project. So hopefully that will work out. If it doesn't, then I could test it as part of the Linux VM, and if it doesn't work out with the Linux VM that I have planned, then if worse comes to worse, I could set up a new VM or a new appliance under ESXi and maybe decrease the core count and memory for one of the planned VMs, which is completely possible because I made sure that the server will have more than enough RAM for most of the activities that it will be handling. With that said, I believe that I have gone over all of the topics for Project Personal Data Center, and would now like to move on to the mod packs section. This section of the video is going to be relatively short. Recently, I made releases for all 3 major mod packs. That would be FIIK, Dynamic Nature, and also Mystic Portals. The 3 releases that I did recently, 1 for each mod pack, are pretty much meant to be stability testing releases. These releases are meant for mostly you guys. They're meant for you guys to go and test them to their limits and to pick apart the mod pack and to look for any underlying issues, bugs, or anything that hasn't been caught in the last 6 months of releases. The current release doesn't have any new mods in it, if I remember correctly. I don't think I added any new mods to it. I simply updated all the mods that were already in the mod pack. Aside from that, I also made I made a few minor configuration tweaks, but nothing major. But the purpose of the most recent release was to get all mods in the mod packs up to their latest compatible and working versions, and also to give you guys a chance to stress test the mod pack to its limits. As I said before, in an attempt to try to find any bugs that we haven't already found or caught within the last 6 months, because any bugs that we haven't caught could be detrimental when I attempt to make the first new release for 8.0 for FIIK, or in general just attempting to make the next major version release for Mystic Portals or Dynamic Nature. If you want to see more notes on why we're doing this release, or should I say pre-release, it feels more like a pre-release because 8.0 for FIIK, for instance, that would be the next major release. But 7.9 is kind of a pre-release in this case, seeing that 7.9 is meant to be the last. It's meant to be the last minor version iteration before I try to introduce all of the new mods. I left a lot of the details on CurseForge, and if you'd like to actually look more into it, feel free to actually check out the mod pages on CurseForge. But the 8.0 release is due within, I believe, the next 2 months. So either in March or in April. Pretty much mid-spring. And in mid-spring, I want to bring out the following mods, some of which will include Da Vinci's Vessels, the full Aether experience, so that would be Aether Classic and also Aether 2, I believe, and a few others. I don't have them all off the top of my head. In fact, I'll just go and pull it up right now. Yeah, I have them right here. But here is an unconclusive list of the mods I want to actually bring to the new mod packs so far. Aether Legacy, Aether Continuation, Aether 2. In addition to that, Rare Ice, Real Snow Magic, and the rest of these are listed here. But in order to do so, I have to make sure that the current version of the mod pack doesn't have any unresolved bugs, because this effectively will increase the size and complexity of all mod packs involved. And I don't really want to add new mods until I can actually confirm that the current version of the mod packs that we have here right now work as they are intended to. Which is why I'm holding off on the next major release for at least a month or two, to give time for testing. With that said, I will now move on to the next topic, because I think I've already talked about this one before. And the next topic will be... You know what? I'm going to skip the social media topic, because that can be its own separate video. I think the social media topic is kind of irrelevant. But here's the next major topic of importance. Last year, I began work on new branding. new branding primarily for this channel, Top Hat Productions 115. The new branding was inspired by some old artwork that I did and posted to DeviantArt. If I can find it, you see I'm guaranteed not to be able to find it now, even though I need to be able to, right? Let's see if I can find it. There we go. New world record. Found it. And if I can find it. Yes, there we go. So this is the artwork that the new branding is supposed to be based off of. And as you can see, I've even color coded it, or at least attempted to. But that has been held off indefinitely due to other efforts that I started recently. As of now, this is going to be on the front burner along with a few other things that I'm working on, like Project Personal Data Center. The time frame that I'm expecting, or at least I'm hoping for this, is 2 months from now, because I have to make multiple versions of this logo. One of which will be, obviously, a channel icon for most of the major accounts that I have. One will be kind of a fav icon that would show up here when you open a browser tab. So I have to make at least 2 different versions of this icon, in addition to possibly others depending on the situation. And I also may have to actually make different sizes. Now, the different sizes won't be too much of an issue because that's pretty easy to handle with modern photo and image editing software. But I will have to make at least 2 major versions of this for this to work. And then for any other kind of side brand accounts that I do have, I may have to redo their logos as well in the coming months afterward. So this first logo, the one for the top hat, is kind of the first one, and it will be a test to see how it goes, to see how much you guys like it when I actually finish the new logo. If you guys have any input or feedback that you'd like to provide pertaining to this logo, any changes that you'd like to see made before I proceed, feel free to point those out in the comments. I will be looking for them. Now that I've talked about the branding, I'm going to go on and move on to the new last section here. Yes, last section. We have, or at least I do, I have around 5 topics listed here that I'd like to discuss. But in order to keep things short, because I know for a fact I've been streaming for 45 minutes now, I'm only going to discuss 2. One is going to be the current GPU market, and 2 is going to be the newest release of Minecraft. The NVIDIA one is the one I'm going to talk about first, especially because most of you already have a lot of information about that one, so it's going to be very easy to talk about that one. As you all know, GPU releases recently haven't been that exciting, or at least they were supposed to be exciting, but they ended up being the equivalent of paper launches. Both AMD and NVIDIA consumer cards have been in short supply for at least the last few months. At first we had the scalpers issue, then it became a crypto mining issue. So at first we had scalpers, or should I say the bots for the scalpers primarily, because the scalpers weren't doing it themselves, they were utilizing bots. We had the bot issue where people were buying large swaths of these graphics cards and then reselling them for massive profit margins. Well, that in and of itself was already bad enough because of the fact that they were pretty much buying up whatever supply of GPUs were available, leaving nothing for gamers, which annoyed a lot of people. Moving on months later, now we could have the very same issue, but now it's being compounded by people who are buying them up for cryptocurrency mining. And if I remember correctly, was it MSI or EVGA? Who was it recently who made a post about something on Twitter? Whoever it was wasn't important. But the point is, now cryptocurrency is the next big thing. And from what I remember hearing, I think cryptocurrency is kind of on its own cycle where it's profitable at some times, then it's not profitable, then it comes back into profitability kind of every few years. So we're kind of at the beginning of a time where cryptocurrency is becoming more and more profitable again. And as a result, that just means that GPUs aren't going to be in supply probably for at least a few more months, if not an entire year from now. NVIDIA supposedly is trying to address the issue with two different moves. One, where they implement software changes to make the 3060 not as profitable for cryptocurrency mining. Another, where they introduce, I think it's called CMP, or cryptocurrency mining processors, which on face value sounds good, but the problem is, since it's software changes, my assumption is someone could probably hack that and make it so that the changes can be undone. I'm not saying that I want it to be undone, but at the same time, as soon as someone says software changes or software configurations, my first assumption is, well, that can be undone by anyone who's willing to actually, I hate to say it, hack the drivers or hack the firmware or VBIOS of a card. But moving aside those assumptions, even if these measures do work, I see at least one or two major issues with the approach, and I'm sure that many other people have brought up the issues with this approach. Firstly, if I remember correctly, during the last cryptocurrency mining boom, once crypto became not profitable, guess what happened? A lot of the cards that the cryptocurrency miners were using, that were GeForce cards, then ended up on the used market for resale at very low prices because of the fact that they had to get those cards off of their hands. The cards were no longer of use because of the fact that mining difficulty increased to the point that the cards simply did not provide enough performance and efficiency to keep up. And as a result, I'm thinking many of those guys probably had to switch to ASIC miners, or ASIC mining ASIC mining hardware, dedicated hardware specifically for the purposes of mining cryptocurrency. But even ignoring the fact that those GPUs won't be coming to the used market, there is also a secondary issue of these cryptocurrency mining processors. If they do go for the cryptocurrency mining processors, then what happens when those cryptocurrency mining processors become no longer of use? Because last I checked, those cryptocurrency mining processors are still based off of the same architecture as the gaming GPUs. They're going to be based off of either Ampere or some variant of Ampere, right? And if that is so, there's going to become a time when those cards become no longer of use. Well, you can't resell those to consumers on the used market because they don't have video outputs, and most consumers, when buying a graphics card, are looking for cards with graphical outputs for use for gaming and other, like for example, video processing and editing. The list goes on. But in most cases, if you're a consumer buying a graphics card, you either want or need a card with video outputs, which severely reduces the resale value and secondhand use of those cryptocurrency mining processors, right? Well, the miners probably realize that already. So if the CMPs have a very low resell ability, what is to say that the miners would even think to consider buying those cards then? If anything, it sounds to me that miners, cryptocurrency miners, will be more likely to try and buy up GeForce cards anyway, due to the fact that the GeForce cards will, in theory, have at least some resale value after they're done using them. Whereas the cryptocurrency mining processors probably won't have as much resale value. Unless you're someone who has like a server, in which case the cryptocurrency mining processors might be somewhat useful, I guess, as secondhand Tesla-like cards, compute cards. But the issue is the cryptocurrency mining processors, from what I've heard, are supposed to be optimized for cryptocurrency mining. So if you try to take a CMP and use it for general data crunching, I don't know how that's going to go. There could be reduced performance for all I know, but hopefully not. So the CMPs seem kind of destined to become e-waste, and miners are more than likely going to be buying up GeForce cards instead anyway, even if and or when CMPs get released. It doesn't actually address the issue. It's kind of like NVIDIA just pretending to address it by putting out a product that very few will actually buy. That is my concern. It creates, in theory, a huge amount of e-waste, even if the miners do go for the cards, because in all actuality, there's a very large chance that the cryptocurrency miners won't go for these CMP devices. But even if they do, once the performance and efficiency of those CMP devices becomes too low for the increasing mining difficulties on like blockchain and stuff like that, where do those things go? Right. End consumers, most end consumers won't be buying them. They'll most likely go to a landfill. Unless someone finds a way to repurpose them, which I sure hope someone does, because otherwise there's going to be a huge waste problem afterward. Probably 1 to 2 years down the line. And all this to me sounds pretty cruddy, because that is perfectly good silicon that could be put to use for other things. So hopefully within the next 6 to 12 months, someone does find a way to repurpose those CMPs for if or when they do hit the secondhand used market. That is, if miners even buy them up in large enough volume at all to make it worth looking for those CMPs on secondhand market. The second half of the equation is, even with the reduction in mining efficiency of the 3060, something tells me that the 3060 still will be bought up by cryptocurrency miners. The fact of the matter is, Ampere performs well enough where I think even with that 50% reduction, miners will still probably buy those cards up. That is my prediction. I understand a lot of you don't like speculation and prediction, but with the way things are going right now, something tells me the 3060 will disappear quickly. In fact, I think it already did, because when did the 3060 get released? RTX 3060. Let's just go and pull it up right now. RTX 3060 release. I think it already released. Yep, already released. RTX 3060. And if I try to find one right now, let's try to find one. Let's try to find one at MSRP, actually. More specifically, let's try to find one at MSRP. Can we find one that's in stock? And can we find one that's at MSRP? Firstly, those are RTX 3060 Ti's. RTX 3060. Come on. Sold out. Sold out. Well, at least the laptops aren't sold out yet. But yeah, long story short, sold out already. Which of course begs the question, who bought them all up already? Because with the way things sound online right now, I don't think a lot of gamers bought them. Yeah, I have a sneaking suspicion that it was cryptocurrency miners. Not angry at them because, hey, I mean, it makes sense for them to buy them. They have the performance and efficiency to actually do the task that they want, but at the same time, though, still sucks for gamers. So with that said, this situation is probably set to at least continue for the next year or so, from what I'm seeing. Especially if cryptocurrency is as cyclical as I've been led to believe. Which means that the secondhand market is probably going to be the best place to look for GPUs. That is, if the prices of graphics cards hadn't already flown up to insane levels. If I remember correctly, let me go and check OBS again. Yep, still good. The GTX 1080 was available, at least in my area, for, was it? Yeah, and this is the non-TI variant. The GTX 1080 was pretty much set to become available for around 400 or maybe, yeah, it was like 350 last I checked on used market. It was at 400 a few months ago, and it was slowly but surely dropping in price on the used market to the point where it was actually becoming a viable option for used market, like people who just want it to play at 1440p and 4K for cheap, right? If I go looking for a GTX 1080 right now, it will probably be sitting at around 500. Let me go and pull up my eBay listings because I keep track of that stuff. Let me see. Save searches. I would like to be wrong in this case. Where are my 1080s? Yep, 1080. Let's see. Is it 400? No, it's not 400 anymore. As I said, a few months ago, it was at 400, and it was slowly dropping to like 350. But now, they're all sitting at $550 average. $540 plus $10 or $13 shipping. So that's $553, $554, $540. Yep. In this case, instead of $550, it's like $560 or $570. But now the prices on used market graphics cards has also gone up as a result, because the market responds. So, at best, I'm thinking, is it maybe the RX 580? Yes. The RX 580 is currently available on used market for an average of 200 or maybe 250 bucks. And this is the 8 gigabyte model version. And the RX 580 is at least a competent graphics card. So if you're looking for a new graphics card, I guess the RX 580 8 gig model would be good. But just keep in mind, you're going to be paying $200 to $250 for the RX 580 8 gigabyte model. And you have to ask yourself whether or not that's worth it to you. If you have no other choice, no other option, and you're looking for a decent gaming experience, the RX 580 or maybe the RX 590 might be your best bet. However, if you are looking for an NVIDIA card, especially if you need the platform features that it provides, that one's going to be a bit tougher. Maybe the GTX 1060? I'm not even sure. Because the thing is, last I checked, the GTX 1060 6 gig actually performs worse than the RX 580 and the RX 590. And these are all a bunch of 1660s. So, but yeah, if you're looking at it from a purely gaming perspective, I would probably grab the RX 580 or the RX 590. And that is simply because of the fact that some of the most recent benchmarks that I've seen have the RX 580 and RX 590 just beating out the GTX 1060. And in addition to that, it is quite possible that the RX 580 or 590 might be available for cheaper than the GTX 1060. But if you're looking for features like NVENC or maybe NVIDIA Shadowplay or other platform-specific features that belong to NVIDIA, then you're probably going to have to shell out for a GTX 1060 or a GTX 1070. In which case, be prepared to pay more. Because if the GTX 1080 goes for $550, mind you, that used to be the used market price for a 1080 Ti, 1070 probably goes for maybe $300, and the GTX 1060 6 gig probably goes for $300 or maybe $200. And that's for the 6 gig model. The 3 gig model obviously performs worse, but if that is your only option, then by all means you might have to go for it. But as it stands, I would probably stick with the RX 580 or the RX 590 in this used market as of now. And of course, if you want me to, I could also post links for some of the videos that I watched for those benchmarks that I just mentioned, because some of those were actually pretty surprising to me. I thought the 1066 gig actually beat out the RX 580 initially, but I guess AMD hardware just ages like fine wine, which is very great for anyone who's holding on to an RX 580. You guys made an incredible investment at that time. Congratulations. Moving on to the final point, and something that's a little bit more enjoyable. Minecraft, in its most recent, I think it's beta releases, or just snapshots in general. In the most recent Minecraft snapshots, I think world size has actually increased, right? I think it was, let me just go ahead and Google it right now. Left caps lock on. Minecraft. Here we go. Well, not world size, world limits. Right. Specifically, the new height limit. The height limit just got increased in the latest snapshots, which is going to be very interesting. In addition to this, I also heard that there were going to be changes to the cave systems, and all in all, I would definitely be interested in testing out the new snapshot. So if any of you want me to host a server for the new snapshot, if and when it becomes available, and if it's already available, I might start looking into it. Let me know in the comments, and I will definitely look into it. Oh my word. Well, thanks for pointing that out. The 1660 is selling for around $700 in some places. Goodness gracious. Well, at least it's a TI variant. I guess the 1660 Super and the non-TI variant might be selling for less. But yeah, if you guys want for me to actually host a snapshot server so you can play around and test out the new height limits and all of that, feel free to let me know and I'll see if I can get one running. Aside from that, that's going to be the end of it for this video. If anyone, I said again. If anyone's keeping track of how many times I said or repeated myself incessantly, please let me know. Totally a fan of nitpicking and criticizing and reviewing myself. And I said again for your enjoyment. Anyway, if you are new here, feel free to leave a like, leave a comment, and if you want to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe. Today's video was obviously a very lengthy talking head video, as people like to call it on YouTube, and all in all, I very briefly covered a lot of the topics mentioned here. I glossed over a lot of details and tried to keep it as short and simple as possible for people who may not be as into tech this time around. That is simply because of the fact that I had a few topics to go over. To be specific, around 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, over 10 or 15 topics to go over, so I had to try to fly through it as quickly as possible. With that said, though, if you are a returning subscriber, feel free to leave comments as well in either in the stream chat or in the actual video comments once this video is no longer a stream, suggesting what we should stream next. Or maybe if you have ideas for games that I should stream in the next coming weeks. Or if you'd like to see me make a new mod pack video, feel free to make a comment about that as well. Whatever you want to see on this channel, make a comment and I'll see if I can make it happen. Aside from that, you guys have a good day. Oh, and I do at least owe you an explanation for why I haven't been available for the last 4 weeks. I have been doing job market research pertaining to the IT field because I work in the IT field and therefore I have an investment in knowing what's happening in that field. As such, As such, I decided to take the last 4 weeks pretty much to actually look into different job opportunities to see what was available and to see what is happening in this field. That is why I've been unavailable primarily. In addition to this, there have also been family events, food giveaways, and other unplanned occurrences that took place within the last 4 weeks that made it pretty difficult to put out a new video. However, things should be toning down relatively soon, and I might even be able to live stream sometime this upcoming weekend. But yes, it's been a hectic 4 weeks, and within that 4 weeks, as I mentioned, I had to reinstall vCenter, which took hours, right? Because vCenter, I think, yeah, vCenter is very nitpicky about DNS as well. Very similar to Active Directory. I would go into more detail about it, but it took at least 3 or 4 attempts to get vCenter right by itself. So I ended up staying up. I think I started the installation attempt at, it was like 9 p.m. Started at 9 p.m., got rid of the original instance, attempted reinstallation the first time, tried to look up error messages, couldn't find anything conclusive, did another attempt, and each attempt takes like 30 to 40 minutes from deleting the previous instance to installing and configuring the new instance, and then they're waiting for the installer to finish and waiting to see what error message it pops up. Yeah, it takes around 30 to 40 minutes, maybe an hour, each go round. And I ended up staying up past midnight just for vCenter on that night. So yeah, that's how one of those days or multiple of those days went. And that was after all of the previous hunting for a vCenter 6.7 ISO, which took days as well, because I couldn't get that through the official VMware site. But all of that was a pain. That took at least a week. And then a really late night, as I mentioned. Moving back before that week, which was last week, that was a pain. there were, I'm trying to remember, because there's like a specific order in which all that happened. But if you want me to try and recap specifically what happened during each and every week, maybe I can do a separate video on that. But that was a mental nightmare and a pain in and of itself. I'm going to go and end the video here. It's an hour and 10 minutes. You guys have a good day, and I will see you in the next video. Hopefully no more than 7 days away from now. And hopefully a gaming video at that. You guys keep it cool.